Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I am Salma Zahid, the Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre. I am joined by Mustafa Farooq, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, as well as Sheikh Navaid Aziz of the Islamic Information Society, Calgary, Nuzhat Jafri, Executive Director of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, and Mahmuda Khan of Human Concern International. I would like to thank them for standing with me today. As a member of the Muslim community who wears a visible symbol of my faith, and as a mother who has raised 2 boys, my family and I are no stranger to be looked at with suspicion and worry when we go about our daily lives. Suspicious looks and microaggressions are sadly a regular part of life for members of racialized communities here in Canada. Yesterday, I was in London, Ontario, for events marking the 1-year anniversary of the Islamophobic attack when 4 members of the Afzal family were killed in a targeted attack while out for an evening walk. It was an attack that shook the Muslim community across Canada, shattering for many our sense of safety and security when doing something as normal as walking down the street in your neighborhood for an evening walk. Sadly, this was not an isolated incident. Last summer, our government convened a national summit on Islamophobia to bring the community together and to share its stories and its recommendations for combating Islamophobia. One of the recommendations that was brought by the community to the summit was to make clear that the intentional violation of the duty of candor must have consequences for members of Canada's security services, including its leadership. While all lawyers and witnesses must treat the court with candor, fairness, courtesy, and respect, Department of Justice policy acknowledges that counsel representing the Attorney General are not an ordinary party and have broader responsibilities to the court. Policy also holds the duty of candor is heightened in expat proceedings where judges do not have the benefit of adversarial submissions. This is particularly true when a warrant is applied for under national security considerations. Despite department policy and the ethical obligations of counsel, the federal court has found in successive rulings in recent years that the Canadian Security Intelligence Service has failed in upholding its duty of candor to the court. This includes failing to disclose that human source information supporting the warrant may have been obtained through some illegal activities, with the judges blaming a combination of institutional and systemic negligence and declaring a cavalier institutional approach to the duty of candor and the rule of law. While the government has undertaken policy reforms in response to court decisions and subsequent inquiries, including a review conducted by former Deputy Minister of Justice Maurice Rosenberg, a legislative amendment with mayors requiring public disclosure of breaches and actions taken by CSIS and the minister in response are necessary to rebuild the public confidence in Canada's public safety institutions. Therefore, I'm announcing today my intention to introduce a private member's bill this fall in the House of Commons to put this responsibility and accountability into law. First, this summer, I will hold a series of public consultations with community groups representing racialized communities, security and legal experts, and other stakeholders and members of the public to advise on how this legislation should be crafted and be made effective. As a member of minority community in Canada that has often been looked at by public safety authorities with suspicion, I know how important it is that these institutions be subject to public oversight and held to the highest ethical standards. I want to consult with affected communities as well as the experts in the law and public safety and craft the legislation that will help Canadians feel more confident the duty of candor be fully upheld. I want members of the racialized communities in Canada to be able to have confidence and faith in their security services. This can only happen with transparency and accountability for these services. I will now turn it over to Mustafa Farooq, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, for some brief remarks, and followed by the other members of the community.
Thank you, MP Zahid. And thank you to everyone here who has joined today at the one-year anniversary mark of the London terror attack. Hundreds of Canadian Muslims from coast to coast have come to Ottawa to call for action. And I want to, first of all, before saying anything else, thank MP Zahid for not just saying words, but to actually standing up and taking that step towards making sure that we have a better future. Because let's call it what it is. Last year, on this day, another attack happened on Canadian soil against members of the Canadian Muslim community. Quebec City, IMO in Toronto, London. We have found again and again that the agencies that are theoretically supposed to protect us from terrorist threats do not seem to be there to protect us. Rather, what we have seen is that these institutions not only fail to support marginalized communities, but actively target them and lie, and then ignore the consequences. Today represents an important juncture in Canadian civil society's continuing efforts to hold its national security apparatus accountable. We deeply welcome MP Zahid's proposed tabling of legislation to spell out new consequences for those involved with CSIS who violate their duty of candor in court. As MP Zahid said, the federal court has found that CSIS and its leaders to have repeatedly violated this duty, which, when we take it beyond legalese, just means that they're not telling the truth. And they call this a cavalier institutional approach towards this important duty. This disrespect towards courts and ultimately towards Canadians has produced behavior from CSIS that includes the withholding of important information to get warrants, the reckless condoning of high legal risk operations, the usage of illegal means to collect data and information, and the disregarding of warnings from federal lawyers about the illegal character of their actions. Over the years, an unaccountable CSIS has also been shamefully involved in high-profile scandals, such as the case of Maher Arar, Abdullah al-Maliki, and Mohammed Oud Slahi. Often, federal lawyers have not done enough to hold their CSIS counterparts accountable and sometimes seem to acquiesce to the agency's illegal activities. It is time for change. We cannot keep having this conversation about a national security agency that considers itself to be better than Canadians, that considers itself to be above the courts, that considers itself to be above the law. No one, and especially those that are meant to protect us, but instead have a history of surveilling us at a time when killings of Muslims in Canada has made Canada a leader amongst the G7 in Islamophobia-related deaths in the past 5 years. No one should accept this status quo. Thank you, MP Zahid, for not doing so. I'll now call upon Nuzhat.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, MP Zahid, for your commitment to introduce legislation to deal with the issue of candor. As a Muslim women's organization, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, we are very, very concerned. For us, the protection and safety of Canadian Muslim women is paramount. Unfortunately, in today's climate, it's very, very difficult, given that Muslim women who are visibly Muslim, like MP Zahid herself, who can be identified as Muslims, who are racialized, who are Black, experience lack of protection and do not feel safe, whether it's in their homes, because in fact, unfortunately, CSIS can come calling because they suspect something, based often just by on appearance or misconceptions of what Muslim women and girls might be engaged in. So I think the proposals for legislation around candor are critical and essential. But as a Muslim women's organization, we are very, very concerned about the very folks that should be protected. That's Muslim women and girls who are countering misogyny, racism, and Islamophobia coming together and really wreaking havoc in their lives. Because when you think about a security system that is designed to protect us, but oftentimes our experiences with those systems is that they don't understand us. They make assumptions that are very harmful to our communities and our members. And instead of protecting us and keeping us safe, we become further targets through many different vehicles that are now available to people who don't trust us. So I welcome the announcement, and we look forward to the consultations with you as you develop the legislation. Thank you very much. Oh, I will now pass it to our colleague from Human Concern International.
Hello, everyone. Salam and peace. On this day that marks the 1 year from a very tragic and heartbreaking incident, my love and prayers for the Afzal family, the entire community of London, as well as the Muslim Canadian community and Canadian as well. It was a very sad experience for all of Canada. Representing Human Concern International, which is one of the first Muslim international charity here in Canada, we represented the Muslim charitable sector and the Muslim Canadian and Canadian community as a whole. It is extremely, we're very happy with the announcement from MP Salma today. So thank you so much for taking this very important initiative. And we look forward to the consultations. I have to say, as a Canadian growing up in Canada, which is my home, I always felt very welcomed, very safe, and very hopeful every step of the way as I was growing up here in Canada. And I would like to see the same for my children. My kids are growing up here. They're very young, but it's very sad that I don't see that future for my kids. The way I grew up here as Canadian, I don't know anymore if my kids will have that same environment where they will feel welcomed, safe, and hopeful about their future. And that's very concerning as a mother, as a community member, as a Canadian Muslim, and as a Canadian. This is Canada, our home, and we need to do everything we can possibly do together with all the sectors, with all the agencies, to build a secured home and be the true leader that the entire world looks up to. Wherever I travel for my work, people look up to Canada. They really look up to Canadian. So we have that high standard that we have to continue to maintain and build toward together, inshallah. So I'm very, very happy for this announcement. I'm really looking forward to further consultation and toward this journey for a positive change for all of Canadians. Thank you so much. And would like to invite Sheikh Navaid Aziz.
I'd like to start off by thanking MP Zahid for having the courage for pushing this bill forward. I can imagine it was no easy task, but it was something that definitely needed to be done, not only for the Muslim community, not only for all other minority groups, but for Canadian society as a whole. In order for Canadian citizens to feel safe in their own country, there has to be a level of trust. And in order for there to be trust, the two pillars of trust need to be met. With that being said, those two pillars are rectifying the wrongs that have been done in the past and allowing for transparency and accountability moving forward. And I believe with this new legislation being pushed forward, hopefully that can be achieved and trust can be restored. In this day and age, as has been mentioned previously, where Muslims are constantly under attack, I am hoping that such legislation will bring a greater amount of safety. And even though we cannot bring back the deceased to life, nor take away the pain of the family members and the communities and the victims, we can hope with an optimistic mindset that things can change. And that's what we're here to do today, to make sure that we as Canadian citizens can bring positive change to our community, to our society, to our country by holding our governments, their law enforcement agencies, their security agencies accountable, and encouraging them to be more transparent. And when that is done, society will be safer. So again, I thank MP Zahid for having the courage to push this bill forward. And I too, along with my other colleagues here, look forward to the consultations. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we'll take questions from reporters, starting with the reporters in the room. Those of you joining us via Zoom, please use the raise hand function if you have a question. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Julia Wong with CBC News. This is a question for the National Council or perhaps any of the other community organizations. Minister Hussein just announced that applications are open for the special representative to combat Islamophobia. My understanding of this role is that it's meant to advise, work with stakeholders. I'm curious whether you think this role has enough teeth.
So thank you for this important question. In the aftermath of the London attack, one of our main asks to government was to create a specific, well-funded office that would be there to tackle Islamophobia within government and across this country. We were very pleased and proud to see Minister Hussein in December of last year accept this recommendation and then it be supported and funded in budget. But you're 100% right. Enforcement and making sure that this institution actually has teeth and that it can hold folks accountable and that it's strong and that it's tough and that it can make sure that it can do things like ask our national security agencies how many Muslims are being surveilled versus white supremacist groups, how many indigenous people are being looked at versus the soldiers of Odin. These are important questions that the Special Representative on Islamophobia will need to answer, but I have every confidence that this process will result in a office that is strong and that has the teeth that is necessary as we go forward.
So then just to follow up on that, are there any concerns that this role will be symbolic? Are there any tangibles that you would have preferred to see instead?
No, at this point, I think we are pleased. Obviously, we'll have to see what comes in the final OIC. And what's actually held out to be the full contours of the role once we get to the appointment, and perhaps whether there'll be legislative amendments that will be required thereafter to make sure that they have access to what they need to have access to. But currently, we're very satisfied with the course that this is taking. Ideally, we would have liked to see someone appointed yesterday in the aftermath of what happened in London because, unfortunately, attacks continue. But this is a positive step that happened today. And we are very pleased with our ongoing work with the government to move this forward.
Next question.
Catherine Tunney, also from CBC. Maybe you want to say at the mic, you talked about how again and again the community doesn't feel protected by Canada's National Security Agency, CSIS. What steps do you need to see or want to see from CSIS to feel better protected, to feel like the community is under, the CSIS is taking care of your community as well?
Well, I mean, I think everyone probably could answer that in different ways, and I think many Canadian Muslims would answer that in different ways. But what I would say, first of all, is that they need to stop unjustly surveilling minority communities. It's no secret that CSIS has surveilled Indigenous groups who are doing nothing wrong, that CSIS has surveilled Black groups who are doing nothing wrong, and that a huge proportion of CSIS has been tooled to surveil Muslims who are doing nothing wrong. How can we begin to feel safe from the threat of groups that are actively killing us when we know that these groups spend most of their time surveilling us? Though that kind of accountability is important. We were pleased to see Minister Mendocino's recent mandate letters, including to the director of CSIS, which made some allusions to this. But I think that this is why MP Zahid's bill is very clear. We need to see teeth to make sure that at the very least, you're not lying to us, And ultimately, I mean, the reality is that a month and a half ago, people were walking around outside, here on the parliamentary lawn with 3%er insignias, a listed terrorist entity. You flag it, you bring it up the line, you take it to folks, and it doesn't seem like always anything is happening. And until we actually start to see that kind of action, it's going to be hard to actually really believe in this institution, which is an institution we need to believe in.
And maybe a follow-up about the bill itself. The government has responded, I guess you could say, to these federal court findings. There, of course, NCIRA, the Oversight Committee, is taking on a review. There is the Rosenberg review that you mentioned as well. I guess the fact that you're out here with plans to introduce a bill, does that mean that you have concerns about those reviews? And do you have concerns about your government's response to CSIS's issue around warrant requests overall?
As I mentioned in my remarks, the government has taken many actions, but I think it's really very important that there is more accountability and more disclosure of any breaches. So I don't know right now at this stage how the bill would look like, but I'm really looking forward to having consultations from different sectors and see that whether we are looking into changes into CSIS Act or requiring Minister of Public Safety to be in a public disclosure of all the breaches that happen and what the leadership has done in order to deal with those breaches.
Next question will be online. Palak Mangat, please go ahead. I believe you're on mute.
Oh, hi, MP Salma Zahid. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thanks. So this question is for the MP, sort of on timelines, but I'm happy to have others offer their thoughts as well. I know that you're launching consultation in the summer and the goal is to table it in the fall. Can you speak about sort of the level of support you see from your party and opposition members in getting this to legislative finish line, essentially? How soon would it come into force if you are tabling it in the fall? And sort of a double barrel question here is why you decided to bring this forward now, because it seems like this recommendation has been around for at least a year. I know you referenced the summit there.
Yes, I would like to do consultations over the summer and then table it in September. I don't have a very high spot in the order of the precedence for the private members' business, but once this legislation is drafted and introduced at first reading in the fall, I will be having some conversations with my colleagues about trading it up in the order of precedence to see if we can get this bill to the second reading debate sooner and onto the committee study. So I think this is an important issue that I hope will find some broad support, and it's a debate that we need to have soon.
Okay, and I guess my follow-up as well, I know that there's obviously a focus here on the NatSec agencies. Can you say specifically, I guess, under what types of cases you think this change would be helpful or is needed even? You mentioned there would be consequences for CSIS leadership, so I'm hoping you can elaborate on how you might see that playing out. And essentially what the tangible difference, how long it could take for the tangible differences themselves to materialize.
See, there have been some examples of the breach of duty in the Candor in October of 2018. CSIS applied to the court for several warrants to intercept the communications of a group of individuals deemed a threat to the security of Canada. And in a federal court ruling released in a redacted form last summer, Federal Court Justice Henry Brown found several breaches by CSIS in those warrant applications. And he found that the CSIS failed to disclose that human source information relied upon to obtain the warrants might have flowed from potential illegal activities. So I think it's really very important that there are we bring into light that there has to be more accountability and what actions have been taken by the leadership in response to the breaches. So that's why I will be looking into drafting a bill so that we can hold the CSIS accountable. and there is more transparency, and the confidence of the people is built in, like they feel safe in their agencies.
All right, and this concludes the press conference. Thank you.
Thank you.